The Galactic Combat Academy's crystalline spires pierced the violet sky of Centauri Prime, their ancient surfaces reflecting the light of 3 suns. Ashley Cooper adjusted her duffel bag, ignoring the burning sensation of the planet's higher oxygen content in her lungs. 6 years as a Force Recon Marine had taught her to embrace discomfort. It meant you were still alive. Human Ashley Cooper, a melodic voice chimed from somewhere above her. Your presence disrupts 10,000 years of tradition. Ashley looked up to find an 8-armed Centauri floating several meters above the courtyard's polished surface. Its translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that she immediately recognized as threat displays, similar to what she'd seen in deep-sea creatures back on Earth. With respect, Master. She left the sentence hanging, waiting for a name. I am Zixtal, 3rd Sage of the Outer Ring. The Centauri's arms moved in hypnotic patterns. And you are a mistake. The Council only accepted Earth's petition to silence the diplomatic corps. No Deathworlder has ever comprehended our arts. A crowd was gathering now. Beings of all shapes and sizes emerged from the Academy's numerous training halls. Some floated, others crawled, and a few seemed to shift between solid and gaseous states. But they all shared one thing: the look of dismissive curiosity one might give a primitive trying to understand quantum physics. That's when the demonstration began. 5 combat drones, each programmed with different fighting styles, activated in a perfect pentagon around Zixtal. The Centauri's movements became a blur of precision and power. Each of its 8 arms seemed to move independently, yet in perfect harmony. The first drone was dismantled before it could even launch an attack. The second and third were used as projectiles against the fourth. The fifth, attempting to analyze the pattern, was caught in what appeared to be a temporal distortion created by the Centauri's lightning-fast movements. But Ashley wasn't impressed. She was analyzing. Asterisk there, the slight delay between the 3rd and 4th arm groups. And that rotation pattern. It's just a fancy version of Marine Corps martial arts, slowed down by their multiple limbs. They're compensating for their own evolutionary limitations. Asterisk. A demonstration of the 10,000 tide style, Zixtal announced, returning to the ground. Perfected over 8 centuries of. Your weight distribution is off. Ashley interrupted, causing a collective gasp from the crowd. You're overcompensating with your lower arm pairs because your species evolved in low gravity. On Earth, we solved that problem in basic training. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient hum of the Academy's power systems seemed to quiet. The Archmaster of the Academy, a being composed of what appeared to be living shadow, materialized from the darkness between pillars. Bold words from a species that still fights with projectile weapons. Its voice was like gravel on silk. Perhaps you would care to demonstrate your understanding. Ashley dropped her duffel bag. The heavy thud it made on the polished floor seemed to emphasize humanity's connection to high-gravity worlds. She'd been on planet for less than an hour, and already she was about to either prove humanity's worth or become a cautionary tale. Set your terms, Archmaster. The 1,000-year shadow strike. A technique so complex it requires decades just to understand its fundamental principles. The shadow being's form rippled with what might have been amusement. Observe once. Attempt to replicate. Fail, and you return to Earth, never to trouble us again. Ashley rolled her shoulders, a ghost of a smile playing at her lips. 6 years of Force Recon, 2 tours in the Martian conflicts, and a lifetime of proving people wrong had prepared her for this moment. Show me. The Archmaster's demonstration began with what looked like darkness itself taking form. Its movements created ripples in reality, each motion trailing shadows that seemed to tear at the fabric of space. The assembled aliens watched in reverence, their various sensory organs fixed on what they considered the pinnacle of martial excellence. Ashley saw something entirely different. Weight transfer, followed by momentum redirection. Basic MCMAP with some fancy physics thrown in. Her eyes tracked each movement, breaking down the supposedly divine technique into its component parts. The shadow being's form twisted in ways that defied conventional physics, but the underlying principles were as familiar to her as field stripping a rifle. Notice how the void embrace flows into the stellar dissolution. A young Proximan student whispered to his cohort. It took Master Kevin 3 centuries just to. It's just telegraphing its moves with extra steps. Ashley muttered, causing nearby aliens to recoil as if physically struck. The Archmaster completed the form with a flourish that bent light around its ethereal body. This technique has brought down empire ships and ended dynasties. Its mastery requires permission to speak freely, sir. Ashley interrupted, falling back on military courtesy more from habit than respect. The shadow being's form condensed slightly, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Granted, human. You're working too hard. Ashley stepped forward, her boots clicking on the crystalline floor. All those shadow effects. They're compensating for your species' natural phase-shifting abilities. You're trying to exist in multiple states at once when you could achieve the same effect with proper body mechanics. A ripple of outrage moved through the crowd. A crystalline being actually cracked from shock. Explain, the Archmaster commanded, its voice carrying an edge that could cut steel. Ashley moved to the center of the demonstration area. Human martial arts developed under constant gravity, where every movement costs energy. We can't phase shift or manipulate reality, so we had to get efficient. She settled into a basic stance. Watch. Without any reality-bending effects or temporal distortions, Ashley executed a series of movements that appeared deceptively simple. Her feet pivoted precisely, her weight shifted with mechanical perfection, and her strikes cut through the air with surgical precision. That's impossible. Zixtal sputtered, all 8 arms gesturing in agitation. She's performing the core sequence without the 17 sacred preparations. Because they're unnecessary, Ashley explained, continuing the form. Those preparations are stability compensations for species that evolved in different gravitational conditions. Humans mastered fighting in high gravity from the start. We had to, or we'd have died out millions of years ago. The Archmaster's form swirled with intense patterns. You claim to understand in moments what takes centuries to master. No, sir. Ashley completed the sequence with a move that made several aliens flinch. I'm saying we solved these problems a long time ago, just without the light show. She gestured to her own form. Everything you're doing with phase shifting and temporal manipulation, we achieved through biomechanics and physics. It's not about mastering the technique. It's about understanding why it works. A tense silence fell over the courtyard. The Archmaster's shadowy form seemed to expand and contract, processing this revelation. Impossible, it finally declared. You must be using some form of technological assistance. No species can. Test me. Ashley's voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had fought their way through countless doubters. Pick your most complex technique. I'll break it down right here, show you exactly how it works, and then improve it. The assembled masters erupted in protests, but the Archmaster erased what might have been an appendage for silence. Very well, human. Its form coalesced into something more solid, more threatening. The 1,000-year shadow strike was merely the prelude. Let us see how you fare against the technique that made the Proximan Empire surrender unconditionally. The void dance of the eternal night. Ashley's lips curled into a slight smile. She'd seen enough to know one crucial thing. These aliens had spent millennia mystifying what humans had streamlined through necessity. Bring it on, sir. The Archmaster's form expanded until it filled half the courtyard, darkness rippling like liquid obsidian. The void dance requires perfect synchronization with the universe's fundamental forces. Masters have died attempting to. Sir, you're just building up potential energy, Ashley interrupted, tracking the shadow's movements. Like a spring being compressed, except you're using spatial distortion instead of metal. The demonstration began. The Archmaster's form split into 12 distinct shadows, each moving in patterns that seemed to violate causality itself. Space warped around each movement, creating afterimages that lingered like cosmic scars. The temperature in the courtyard dropped precipitously as reality itself seemed to bend to the technique's will. Ashley didn't see cosmic majesty. She saw inefficiency. "Stop," she called out after the third sequence. "You're bleeding energy with every transition." Those reality warps. They're compensating for poor follow-through. The shadows snapped back into a single form. "You dare." "Permission to demonstrate, sir." Without waiting for a response, Ashley moved to the center of the training area. "The problem isn't the technique. It's that you're trying to force the universe to accommodate your movements instead of working with existing physics." She settled into a starter position that made several alien masters whisper in confusion. It wasn't the traditional starting pose for the void dance. It was something entirely new. "Watch the footwork first," Ashley announced. Then she moved. Her movements were a fraction of the speed of the Archmaster's demonstration, but every alien present felt something they'd never experienced before: pure, distilled efficiency. Where the traditional form used spatial distortion to achieve its effects, Ashley's movements created the same results through precise application of force and momentum. "Notice how the weight transfers through the centerline." She continued the form, each motion flowing seamlessly into the next. "You don't need to bend space if you understand how to use gravity as a multiplier. Earth's fighters figured this out thousands of years ago, when we were still using sticks and stones." A crystalline master shattered in shock. Two Proximan instructors began arguing in their native tongue about the implications. The Archmaster remained silent, its form condensing into an ever darker mass. Ashley completed the sequence with a movement that somehow carried the same devastating potential as the Shadow Being's reality-warping version, but achieved it with nothing more than perfectly applied biomechanics. "The traditional form uses 12 transitions," she explained, standing relaxed despite the growing tension. "I counted 4 that serve no purpose except tradition, 3 that actually work against the technique's goal, and 2 that exist solely to look impressive." She shifted her weight slightly. "I can achieve the same effect with 5 movements. Want to see it at full speed?" "Proceed." The Archmaster's voice carried an undercurrent of, "Was that fear?" Ashley nodded once. Then she exploded into motion. What followed wasn't the cosmic display of the traditional form. There were no reality warps, no spatial distortions, no violations of causality. Instead, the assembled masters witnessed something far more terrifying. Perfect, inevitable efficiency. Each movement flowed into the next with mechanical precision, building momentum and force until the final strike created a shockwave that cracked the courtyard's crystalline floor. The silence that followed was absolute. "Impossible," a Zentari master whispered. "She generated the same destructive potential without accessing the quantum substrate." "No," Ashley corrected, still in her final pose. "I just didn't waste energy trying to show off. In actual combat, you don't get points for style." The Archmaster's form had condensed to the size of a pinpoint, dense with what might have been rage or revelation. "You have not mastered our art. You have simplified it. With respect, sir, I've perfected it." Ashley straightened, squaring her shoulders. Humanity had to get efficient or die. We didn't have the luxury of spending centuries adding flourishes to our techniques. Then perhaps, the Shadow Being's voice carried a new edge. "It is time for a practical demonstration. Combat drones cannot adequately test your theories." Ashley's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd wondered when they'd stop playing around. "Name your champion, sir." "I'm ready." The crowd parted as a new figure approached the training area. Unlike the other aliens, this one moved with a pronounced limp, its iridescent scales dulled with age. Dr. K'tal, the exile of the Rigelian Science Academy, was known for theories so controversial that his own species had branded him a heretic. "Fascinating," he said, his multifaceted eyes scanning Ashley with scientific intensity. "Your neural patterns are practically incandescent." "Stay out of this, K'tal," the Archmaster warned, its shadowy form rippling. Your theories have no place. Oh, but they do. Catal's translator crackled with excitement. Watch her synaptic responses. Every movement, every observation is being processed and adapted in real time. It's exactly as I hypothesized. Ashley maintained her ready stance, but tilted her head slightly. You're scanning my brain activity. Indeed. Catal's tail whipped back and forth enthusiastically. And it's revolutionary. Your species' neuroplasticity is off the charts. While we've spent millennia encoding combat knowledge into genetic memory, humans. He paused for dramatic effect. Humans evolve with every breath. The assembled masters muttered among themselves. A younger Proximan student dared to speak up. But that's impossible. Combat mastery requires generational learning. The genetic encoding process alone is unnecessary for humans. Catal interrupted. He produced a holographic display showing rapidly changing neural patterns. Look, every time she observes a technique, her brain creates new neural pathways instantly. What takes us centuries to encode into our genetic memory, she processes and adapts to in moments. The Archmaster's form wavered. You suggest this human is superior. Catal's scales shifted color with excitement. In terms of combat adaptation, absolutely. Their species evolved on a death world with crushing gravity and constant predatory threats. They couldn't wait centuries to develop perfect techniques. They had to adapt or die. And look at the result. He gestured at Ashley. Every movement optimized for maximum efficiency. No wasted energy on cosmic displays or reality manipulation. Pure, distilled survival expertise, refined by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Ashley kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced. This explained so much about her life. How she'd picked up complex combat techniques almost instinctively. How she could spot weaknesses in supposedly perfect forms. Impossible. A crystalline master chimed. No species can. Show them. Catal turned to Ashley, his eyes gleaming. Show them the neural adaptation in action. Attempt something you've never seen before. The Archmaster's form condensed again, then expanded explosively. The Starfall sequence. None have mastered it without at least a decade of preparation. Ashley watched as the shadow being demonstrated the technique. It was beautiful, in a cosmic sort of way. Reality itself seemed to fold and unfold with each movement. But beneath the spectacular display, she saw the underlying principles. Momentum transfer, gravitational manipulation, kinetic chaining. The neural activity is spiking, Catal announced, watching his readings. She's not just observing. She's improving it in her mind before even attempting it. Ashley moved. Her version of the Starfall sequence stripped away the cosmic effects, replacing them with brutal efficiency. Where the traditional form used 12 movements to build power, she achieved the same result in 7. The final strike carried such focused force that it created a visible distortion in the air, achieved through pure physics rather than spatial manipulation. Remarkable. Catal's scales had turned bright gold with excitement. She's not just replicating, she's optimizing. This confirms everything I theorized about Deathworlder evolution. The Archmaster's form had gone completely still. When it spoke, its voice carried an edge of both fear and fascination. If what you say is true, then humans are not merely students to be taught. They are the next stage of combat evolution, Catal finished, and the key to revolutionizing everything we thought we knew about martial arts. Ashley finally relaxed her stance, allowing herself a small smile. So about those advanced classes. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted her. War Sage Vexthor, the Academy's most feared instructor, had arrived. The real test was about to begin. War Sage Vexthor's scales gleamed like polished obsidian as he descended the Academy's central staircase. Each step carried the weight of 10,000 years of combat tradition. His species, the Draconids, had been old when most civilizations were still learning to make fire. The humans' neural patterns are destabilizing the students, he announced, his voice resonating through the courtyard. Already 3 have requested instruction in her methods. 4, actually, came a voice from the crowd. A young Proximan stepped forward, his 4 arms crossed defiantly. I want to learn how to fight like that. Like a primitive. Vexthor's laugh carried centuries of contempt. You would abandon 10 millennia of refined combat arts for efficiency, Ashley interrupted, earning gasps from the crowd. Show me your best combat form. Student. Crystal, human teacher. The young Proximan bowed slightly. The spiral wind form is my specialty. Ashley nodded. Show me. Crystal launched into a complex series of movements, his 4 arms weaving patterns in the air that created visible distortions in spacetime. It was beautiful, complex, and completely impractical. Stop, Ashley commanded after 30 seconds. You're fighting yourself. Those extra arms, they're your advantage, but you're using traditional forms designed for 2-armed species. She moved to stand beside him. Try this instead. What followed stunned the assembled masters. Ashley demonstrated a modified version of Marine Corps close combat techniques, adapted on the spot for Proximan physiology. Where traditional forms had Crystal's secondary arms following his primaries, Ashley's version had all 4 arms operating independently but in harmony. Again, she instructed. But this time, think of your arms as individual fighters working as a team. Crystal attempted the modified form. His first try was clumsy, but by the 3rd attempt, his movements had achieved a fluid efficiency that made several masters mutter in disbelief. Impossible, one whispered. He's improved more in 3 minutes than in 2 years of traditional training. Because she's teaching his body, not his genetic memory, Dr. Catal observed, scanning frantically. Look at his neural patterns. They are beginning to mirror human adaptation rates. Enough. Vexthor's roar shook the courtyard. This is corruption of the highest order. Our arts are perfect, refined by tradition, not necessity. Ashley countered. She turned to the crowd. Anyone else want to learn how to actually fight instead of just looking impressive? The response was immediate. A crystalline being stepped forward, its faceted surface catching the light. Our forms are based on maintaining structural integrity, but they're slow, because you're trying to stay perfectly aligned. Ashley noted. Watch this. She demonstrated a modified version of Aikido that used the crystalline being's natural lattice structure to generate power while maintaining stability. The alien's subsequent attempts at the technique created bell-like tones that resonated through the courtyard. More students came forward. A gaseous entity learned how to use its amorphous nature more efficiently. A low-gravity species discovered how to leverage its lightweight frame instead of fighting against it. Each demonstration further proved Ashley's point. The ancient arts weren't perfect. They were stagnant. This is revolution, Dr. Catal whispered, his scales shifting through patterns of academic excitement. She's not just teaching techniques, she's showing them how to adapt, how to think like a human. Vexthor's tail lashed against the crystalline floor, leaving scores in the ancient surface. Enough. You dare to corrupt our sacred arts with your primitive efficiency. Then face me, human. Face the true power of 10,000 years of perfect combat evolution. Ashley turned slowly to face the Draconid master. She'd been expecting this since she first arrived. The crowd fell silent as she walked to the center of the courtyard, her boots clicking against the crystal floor. Sir, she said, settling into a ready stance that no alien had ever seen before, I thought you'd never ask. The coming battle wouldn't just be about personal victory. It would determine the future of combat itself in the galaxy. War Sage Vexthor's preparation ritual began with a display that would have destroyed lesser beings. His scales ignited with internal energy, each one becoming a miniature star. The air around him distorted as he accessed combat forms, so ancient they predated many species' evolution. The terms, he growled, his voice resonating at frequencies that cracked nearby crystal formations. You will face every major combat form in the Academy's archives. Survival is victory. Failure is extinction. The Council will revoke humanity's right to participate in galactic combat arts. Ashley's response was to remove her boots. The action was so unexpected, so mundane, that it briefly confused even Dr. Catal's scanning equipment. Fascinating. Her neural patterns suggest. Basic training. Ashley interrupted, placing her boots carefully aside. First thing they teach you in hand-to-hand combat. Feel the ground. You can't fight what you can't feel. Vex Thor's laugh shook the courtyard. You face techniques that have destroyed civilizations, and you remove your footwear. You're about to show me the most devastating combat forms in galactic history, Ashley replied, wiggling her toes against the crystal floor. I want to feel exactly how they work. The Draconid Master's eyes narrowed. Begin with the seventh seal of the Void Hunters. He launched into a form that bent light around his body, creating afterimages that attacked independently. It was a technique designed to overwhelm an opponent's ability to track movement. Against most species, it was instantly lethal. Ashley didn't move. Her eyes tracked each afterimage, her bare feet sensing subtle vibrations through the floor. Asterisk there. The weight shift creates a pattern. The real attack comes from. Asterisk. She pivoted slightly, and Vex Thor's primary strike passed through empty air. Impossible, he snarled. No one has ever. Your tail telegraphs the real attack, Ashley explained, still not launching any counters. Those light-bending moves are just distraction. The killing stroke always comes from the opposite angle of your tail's weight shift. The crowd murmured. No one had ever analyzed a master's technique during combat before. The crimson path of the Star Eaters. Vex Thor roared, launching into an even more complex form. This one actually ignited the air around him, creating trails of plasma that sought Ashley like living weapons. This time she moved, but not to attack. Each step was precise, measured, almost lazy. The plasma trails missed by millimeters, yet she appeared to be hardly trying. You're using the plasma for area denial, she noted, ducking under a particularly vicious strike. But you're burning too much energy maintaining it. 3 more sequences, and you'll have to drop the technique. Vex Thor's roar of frustration shook the Academy walls. He launched into form after form, each more devastating than the last. The dance of broken suns, the Emperor's last laugh, the 1,000 scales of judgment, techniques that had ended wars, toppled empires, and reshaped the political landscape of entire sectors. Ashley met each one with minimal movement and maximum efficiency. Where Vex Thor burned energy like a supernova, she conserved it like a survival expert rationing water. Each of her movements was purpose-built, stripped of unnecessary flourish. Look at her neural patterns, Dr. Kull exclaimed. She's not just countering the techniques, she's learning them, improving them, and discarding their weaknesses in real time. Finally, after what seemed like hours but had been mere minutes, Vex Thor paused. His scales had dimmed, his breathing heavy. How? He demanded. How are you doing this? Ashley settled into a neutral stance. Because I'm not fighting years of tradition. I'm fighting you. And you're tired, sir. That old injury in your left hip is starting to bother you. I can see it in your weight distribution. The courtyard went dead silent. No one had ever noticed the War Sage's injury. Vex Thor's eyes blazed. Then perhaps it's time for the forbidden form, the one that cost its last practitioner their sanity. Ashley's eyes narrowed slightly. Bring it on, sir. I've got all day. The real battle was about to begin. The midnight requiem of the Void Empress, Vex Thor announced, his voice carrying a note of finality. Last performed 3,000 years ago. Its creator went mad from the cosmic knowledge required to maintain its forms. The air around him began to darken, not with shadow, but with the absence of existence itself. Reality seemed to peel away layer by layer, revealing something ancient and terrible beneath. Now we'll see what your human efficiency makes of true power, His scales began to resonate at frequencies that made several crystalline beings crack and retreat. Dr. K'Tal's scanning equipment exploded in a shower of sparks. Impossible. He's accessing dimensional frequencies that shouldn't be stable in our reality. Ashley finished, her bare feet shifting slightly on the crystal floor. Because they're not meant to be. This technique isn't about fighting. It's about breaking reality itself. Vexthor's form began to multiply, not with mere afterimages, but with actual quantum duplicates, each existing in a slightly different phase of reality. Face oblivion, human. The attack came from everywhere at once. Strikes that could shatter planets, movements that twisted causality itself, powers that had ended entire species in the ancient past. The very air howled with dimensional instability. But Ashley saw something else. "You're killing yourself, sir," she said, ducking and weaving through the apocalyptic assault with minimal movement. This technique isn't forbidden because it's too powerful. It's forbidden because it burns out the user's neural pathways. Silence. Vexthor's roar transcended normal sound, becoming something that existed between moments of time. "Watch his scales," Ashley called to the crowd, still evading with precise efficiency. "The resonance is destroying his own cellular structure. 3 more sequences, and he'll suffer permanent damage." The War Sage launched into an even more devastating combination. Reality itself began to crack around his quantum duplicates, each strike carrying enough force to reshape continents. Ashley finally moved to counter. What happened next would be debated in the Academy for centuries to come. She didn't match power with power or cosmic force with cosmic force. Instead, she began a movement so simple, so fundamentally basic, that several masters didn't even recognize it as a combat technique at first. "Marine Corps fighting style. Form 1, she announced calmly. Adapted for multi-dimensional combat. Her movements were pure efficiency, each one calculated to use Vexthor's own power against him. Where he existed in multiple dimensions, she remained perfectly grounded in this one. Where he commanded cosmic forces, she applied simple leverage and timing. "Impossible," a master cried. "She's countering the Void Empress technique with basic movements." "No," Dr. K'Tal corrected, his scales shifting to patterns of pure academic excitement. "She's showing us its fundamental flaw. Look." With each simple, precisely timed movement, Ashley was forcing Vexthor's quantum duplicates to reintegrate. Every efficient step brought reality back into alignment. She wasn't fighting the technique, she was correcting it. "The forbidden form isn't forbidden because it's too powerful," she explained, still moving with calm precision. "It's forbidden because it's fundamentally flawed. You're trying to exist in multiple dimensions when you could achieve the same effect by properly using the one we're in." A final step, a simple pivot, and a basic joint lock applied at exactly the right moment. Reality snapped back into focus as Vexthor's duplicates collapsed into his primary form. The War Sage fell to his knees, his scales dimmed to near darkness. "How?" he gasped. "That technique ended empires." "Because they fought it on its own terms," Ashley replied, offering him a hand up. "They tried to match impossible power with impossible power. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right one." The courtyard was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, Vexthor took her hand and rose. "Perhaps," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, "it is time for the Academy to learn some new ways of thinking." The revolution had begun, but its real test was still to come. The Academy's Grand Council chamber hadn't been opened in 3 centuries. Now, its ancient doors groaned with the weight of tradition as they admitted the assembled masters, students, and one barefoot human. The Archmaster's shadowy form occupied the central podium, while 12 of the most ancient beings in the galaxy sat in a perfect circle around it. Their combined age measured in millennia, their wisdom in epochs. "We have witnessed something unprecedented," the Archmaster began, its voice resonating through dimensions. "The human Ashley Cooper has not merely mastered our arts. She has fundamentally changed them. Heresy, whispered one ancient master, its crystalline form clouded with age. Truth, countered Vexthor, his scales still dim from their battle. I have tasted defeat at her hands, but more importantly, I have tasted enlightenment. Dr. Kittle stepped forward, his new scanning equipment humming. The data is undeniable. Human neural adaptation combined with their high-gravity evolution has created something we never considered, a species that can perfect combat forms through pure efficiency. Ashley stood silent, still barefoot, feeling the ancient crystal floor beneath her feet. She could sense the subtle vibrations of each council member's anxiety, their fear of change warring with the evidence before them. Demonstrate, commanded the Archmaster. Ashley nodded once, then began to move. This time, she didn't demonstrate any single style or form. Instead, she showed them something entirely new, a fusion of human combat efficiency with the fundamental principles of every major galactic combat art. Where traditional forms required reality manipulation, she achieved the same effects through precise biomechanics. Where ancient techniques commanded cosmic forces, she used leverage and timing. Each movement was a perfect synthesis of human pragmatism and alien wisdom. Behold, Dr. Kittle announced, his scales shimmering with excitement. She's not destroying our arts, she's evolving them. Young Crystal stepped forward next, demonstrating his newly modified Proximant combat form. His forearms moved with unprecedented efficiency, each motion stripped of unnecessary flourish, but losing none of its effectiveness. One by one, students began demonstrating their adapted techniques. The crystalline master who had shattered in shock now moved with liquid grace. A gaseous being performed attacks with pinpoint precision instead of widespread destruction. This is the future, Ashley finally spoke. Not human arts replacing yours, but evolution through synthesis. We can learn from each other. The council members stirred, their ancient forms showing signs of what might have been hope. And what of tradition? Asked one, its voice carrying the weight of eons. What of the wisdom passed down through countless generations? Keep it, Ashley replied simply. Keep the forms, keep the history, keep the philosophy, but allow them to grow. A tradition that cannot evolve is already dead. The Archmaster's form expanded, filling the chamber with dancing shadows. Then let it be recorded in the eternal archives. Today marks the beginning of a new age in galactic combat arts. The human Ashley Cooper has shown us that true mastery lies not in the preservation of perfection, but in the endless pursuit of improvement. Vexthor stepped forward, his scales beginning to regain their luster. I propose a new division within the Academy, one dedicated to the synthesis of combat arts across all species, with Ashley Cooper as its head instructor. Seconded, Dr. Kittle chimed in, his tail whipping excitedly. The research possibilities alone. Granted, the Archmaster's voice carried finality. But remember, human, with evolution comes responsibility. What you have started here today will ripple through the galaxy for millennia to come. Ashley finally smiled, wiggling her toes against the ancient crystal floor. Then we better get started. I got some ideas about improving that Void Empress technique that won't drive anyone insane. As laughter rippled through the chamber, some beings laughing for the first time in centuries, a new era in galactic martial arts began. Humanity hadn't just proven itself worthy of the ancient arts, it had shown the galaxy a new path forward. Evolution, after all, never stops. It just needs someone willing to take the first step barefoot.